So, my name is Vip Vipperman, excited to be back on the Backing the Bold podcast today with Dan White from ARK Venture Studio. Dan, glad to have you with us.
Good morning, Vip. Thank you for having me on.
Now, Dan, where are you calling in from today?
So it's afternoon where I'm calling in from. I'm adjusting to your Texas time zone. I'm in the south of England, in the UK.
Awesome. Glad to have you with us. Now, how in the world does Eagle Venture Fund in Dallas, Texas connect to South UK? Tell us a little bit about your story. And first, like give us a little bit of your background and then how Eagle and you guys made the connection.
Well, yeah, it's been a great relationship and a great connection over the last, I guess, about 20 months. You guys have a venture studio. You believe in the venture studio model. ARK
Absolutely.
is a venture studio. And so we really connected around that, the belief in that mechanism for creating venture value, the
Mm.
repeatability, the predictability, the better outcomes that you get on average through a venture studio. We share a similar vision around impact and purpose. We're driven in many ways by our faith,
Awesome.
and so there's a powerful set of connections which has brought us together over the last 20 months. We've enjoyed it. It's been fun. The ARK itself is a venture studio. We're a venture builder. So we start with a blank sheet of paper, a hunch around a large pain point that we might be able to find a disruptive solution to. And then we have a methodology, a pretty prescriptive methodology that takes us through the process of validating a problem, ideating solutions, validating ideas, killing many of those clearly, and then taking that through design, ultimately build, attaching founding teams to that venture as we de-risk it, um, funding it partly ourselves and partly externally, and that's partly where the Eagle Venture Fund has been a great partner, and then letting the ventures kind of go and grow up outside the studio. So that's our model. The space that we inhabit, or the thesis, or the kind of the secret sauce that we have, is a deep connection and credibility within the global insurance sector.
Okay.
And this comes out of 20 years of my experience prior and some of the team's experience prior in working for some of the biggest insurers in the world. So the
Hmm.
likes of Chubb and Travelers, Lloyd's of London, and the big reinsurers like Munich Re and Swiss Re and so on. And in working with those over the last 20 years before ARK, we've built this deep layer of credibility and connectivity around product innovation, risk management innovation, and have built the relationships that we need to work with those partners to build things that leverage their ecosystems as well.
Nice. Okay. Very, very cool. So tell me, does a teenager in the UK just decide one day that he wants to spend his whole life doing insurance technology businesses? Like, how did you get into that space in the first place? Did you grow up in it, family connected to it?
It's mostly accidental, um,
Okay.
uh,
Tell me the
uh,
story.
or providence. I grew up in Central Eastern Africa.
Okay.
My parents were missionaries. I think we may share some kind of connectivity there, Vip. Um, Poorest country in the world. Moved to the UK at 16 and ended up in business, and started clambering my way to the top of the greasy pole and searching for personal wealth, and had a road to Damascus experience at about the age of 30, which turned my life
Oh,
around
wow.
and pointed it in a different direction. Still connected to business and wealth
Mm.
creation, but with a very different motivation, one that was predominantly generosity based rather than self based. And in that period of in my early career, I had ended up working in the digital, in as kind of 2000, the dot-com bubble was growing and bursting, and insurers, amongst many other companies, were starting to think about acquiring and servicing customers through the internet. And I was a big part. I happened to be a big part of doing that here in the UK, and then over time into Europe and the States. And and so out of that was born my first business called 90, which is an innovation consultancy to the insurance sector. that works with about 60 of the big carriers and reinsurers. And from that was born out this idea that actually there were spaces of risk that the insurers were not protecting, and that would take an entrepreneur and VC backing and high levels of creativity to go and attack. So if you
Yeah.
look at what we're doing within ARK is we're taking the kind of total pool of risk that humanity faces and saying, right, this section over here, insurers have done this. It's a $6-7 trillion global industry. They're
Got it.
protecting these risks. All this other stuff, they're not. All right. So that's our playing field. That's the stuff
Yeah.
we want to go out and build solutions to.
That's incredible. And to do it, but with a team that knows the industry, knows how to get it done, and knows what it takes, and what the big insurer is gonna want to do with it, right? Because at the end of the day, you're gonna test the market, find out if the insurance product works, and then probably sell it to one of the big guys, some of the big guys that you already have relationships with.
That's right. In some cases, those will be our exits. Yeah. Um, but I think like most good entrepreneurs, we're starting with a customer pain point or
Mm,
some kind of failure or friction point in the market value chain, starting there, and we're solving then later for where our exit lies. So trying to create value, trying to create disruptive business models, trying to create moats, trying to create scaling paths, and then working out where we sell. But yeah, some of our early ventures, yeah, if I had to guess, some of the big insurers who we know well and whose venture funds we have helped structure and build may end up being the acquirers of some of our businesses. So there's a
so,
nice circularity, right? We start with an understanding of the pain points and the gaps. We've got
yep.
the connectivity to those insurers so we can use their distribution channels, their agent networks, we can use their risk capital licenses, right? Without having to kind of break our way into an industry that we don't have any history in. And in some cases, we're getting funded through some of those relationships, and potentially we close the loop and exit back to them. We'll see. We're too early in our story to tell whether that will be the final step.
Yeah, I mean that's the sweet part of the venture studio, right? You get to leverage all those relationships and build together, like co-create instead of doing it, on your own with no opportunities and stuff. That's awesome. Um, Tell me a little bit about what in that space is getting you excited now,
Hmm.
and how you come up with a new product idea. I mean,
Yeah.
like you said, there's kind of the established stuff, right? You've got, cars and houses and, boats and, you've got business like, insurance, those kind of things. How do you come up with a new product idea, or what's getting you excited? Talk
Yeah.
to me.
Well, so it is the pain points that we see out there that get us excited, and the potential to actually do something about them.
Hmm.
Um, the way we generate those ideas is it's a combination of probably two or three things. There's one mechanism which is a fairly structured. We'll go away and look at a large macro problem.
Hmm.
So recently we looked at aging populations as a kind
Okay.
of major socio-demographic trend. And we looked into that and looked at what was happening, what venture was doing, what the stats were, what the demographics were, which markets were most affected. And out of that, we generated from memory 17 different venture hypotheses.
Wow.
One of those hypotheses has ended up as a venture that we call Inheritly, which is one that Eagle happens to have invested in. And that particular venture is dealing with a pain point around death.
Hmm.
And the pain point there is that when a person dies, not having adequately and properly prepared their estate and their legacy plans, their family is left at risk,
Hmm.
vulnerable to exorbitant legal fees, vulnerable to cash flow issues when inheritance tax and other costs are due before probate and estate is settled. They're vulnerable to kind of the emotional load, the administrative load, and they're vulnerable to being taken advantage of. So we come pre-death with this venture, and we help that person and their family, their beneficiaries, work together with their advisors on a digital architecture layer and platform to put in place a high quality estate and legacy plan that protects them and their family from that post-death risk. So that's one example.
So I'm not an
Yeah.
insurance guy, but isn't that called life insurance? I mean,
Life insurance is wrapped up into this because that kind of set of protection products is part of a good estate and legacy plan.
okay,
But it's not the only part of the plan, right? Life
gotcha.
insurance, when it triggers, can be triggered in a very tax inefficient way. It can be inadequate to provide for the beneficiaries,
Okay,
right? Income protection is another form of protection which often needs to act as a first layer before the life insurance payout. And then it's a
nice.
question of wills, trusts, right? Powers of attorney. There's a whole bunch of other stuff.
So you look at the plan as a whole, and not just that one
Yeah,
little piece.
funeral planning, wishes, digital legacy management. Handing over your life to your next of kin. Um, yeah, so we're working on that. It's a pre-seed venture. It's being tested with the market now. But that's one way in which we generate ideas is a relatively, if you like, formulaic or process-driven approach. But the other way is the life experiences that we have. So that particular venture was enhanced in many ways. Not enhanced, was further triggered in many ways by the death of one of my colleagues' father. So he died about 18 months ago, maybe nearly 2 years ago. And that coincided with us working on the aging population
Mm,
space and really focused the team's mind on the pain points that happened to a family
yeah.
immediately before, during, and after a loved one's death. So that
Eh,
happens. And then the other thing is, I guess we all carry around a number of frustrations with the world as it is. But we see it through different lenses. So I'll give you an example. This device, right? We've all got one of these.
your phone, yeah.
I've got a 12-year-old daughter. She doesn't have one of these. She's more or less the only kid in her class who doesn't.
Mm,
The reason she doesn't is I have a fear, not that she will break the phone, because I've got insurance for that, but that the phone will break her. And
mm,
I don't have insurance for that, right? I don't have an
yeah.
app that protects my daughter. And when I think of a $6-7 trillion global risk industry, which is there to protect the things that we care for,
Mm,
it hasn't solved that problem yet, protecting our kids from the dangers of social media, technology addiction, cyber abuse, early exposure to pornography, these sorts of issues. So what is the insurance-powered solution to a problem like that? So
interesting.
it's an idea that we're toying with, but I share that as example as it's one of the things that we look at.
Yeah, you should talk to our
Techless.
one of our other UK portfolio companies,
Yeah, yeah.
Richard Bursty and those
I
guys at
know.
SafeNet.
I'm waiting for their phone to hit the UK, and then I'm gonna get one.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
But it's a fascinating concept. We insure certain things, but not necessarily something else
yeah.
very related to it.
I'll give you
Um,
another example. If you take your car, right, your prized car, and
mm,
you end up in a pretty beat up area of town, and you have to leave your car parked up on the street in a yeah, not particularly nice part of town. You're a bit worried about it, but you're not that worried about it because if someone breaks into it and steals it or damages it, you've got insurance for that.
mm,
If your wife or your daughter were to walk through that same part of town and be assaulted, right? Something that's much more precious to us than the
right.
car. There isn't a product that protects our wives, our daughters from these kind of issues. And from that, you can extrapolate into domestic abuse and domestic violence, and then suddenly you end up back with the kind of stuff you guys are doing around trafficking. And so many of these risks, which sit in our minds and which we would hate to happen, are not protected through either a formal insurance method or an informal or tech-driven risk management or risk mitigation or risk prevention technique. And it's
Hmm.
some of those models that we're trying to build within ARK.
Interesting. Have a button on the phone, require have a immediate response team or something like that. There's all,
Yeah,
and
it's those
then,
sorts of ideas we
and
can,
could a company, provide that for their employees or something like that?
yeah,
That's, yeah, fascinating. Okay. It's interesting to think of where the insurance business can go. like what the opportunities are. I spent some time in the real estate industry, and for us, that was a big part of it. I still remember when I sold a property one time to a gentleman who was from out of country who had moved in, and it was a ranch property, 600 beautiful acres, a bunch of cows, that type of thing. And fortunately, we insured it, really, really well. And he said, like, how often do tornadoes come to this part of, Texas? And I was like, honestly, not very much. I mean, in my time in Texas, there hadn't been one, but, insurance is there. Sure enough, within 6 months, a tornado touched down on his property, which that area has never seems to get them, and took out his whole barn, or at least half of it. And he was very, very thankful for it. So it's amazing the timing of things and just how important this industry has become. You mentioned a couple times stewardship and just the concept of really looking after well the things that you've been given, right? Talk to me a little bit about like how you think of that when it comes to the insurance industry, but also how you think of it when it comes to like funding and things like that.
Yeah. So ultimately, the that kind of redirect in my life that I mentioned earlier about when I was about 30, for me it was a challenge to lay down wealth for self,
Mm.
but not to walk away from wealth creation, capitalism as a mechanism for creating change, and for creating wealth that could be deployed in ways that are frankly probably just a bit better.
Yeah.
And so I've engineered my business or my business interests such that the majority, so 90% of the wealth that is created through my holding company is captured to philanthropic purposes. It
Wow.
doesn't impact our other investors. It doesn't impact the staff. It doesn't impact the founding teams who come on and partner with us on the ventures we build. But my share of it is locked in that way. So that's part of how I see stewardship. And then the second part is
Can I ask
around,
really quickly on
yeah,
that? Is that to protect your heart, or is it because you want so much to fund a certain specific area?
it's to defend against my heart.
Okay.
And if I so it, yeah, to protect my heart, to protect that intent against my potential future greed. Right? It's
Okay.
one thing to say I'm going to be generous and selfless when there's $100 in the bank. It's another thing to be generous and selfless when there's $1 million or $10 million in the bank. And so it's in the business bank, that is, right?
Yeah. No,
And
I get it.
yeah, so it's kind of locking the door and throwing away the key and saying, right, I cannot change this outcome. Um, but yeah, the second part of stewardship for me is okay. I've got a profit making business, the innovation consulting business, and I use the profits from that to fund the studio and the early stages of ideation that we do on the early ventures. So the kind of decision making around allocating that hard earned cash to early stage high risk ventures, there's a process of stewardship and careful decision making.
Yeah.
It's venture investing, right? Super early stage, and so in that context, I've just surrounded myself with people who know a lot more about making those decisions, people who are a lot more analytical in their mindset than I am,
Hmm.
people who are much more likely to see the downside risk rather than see the upside potential, which is my natural bent.
Mm.
People who've done this before.
Yeah.
One of my management team members has spent 8-9 years in venture studio contexts and built very large portfolios of very valuable businesses. And so having people like that on board to help with the stewardship of the small amounts. It's a bit like the story of the talents, right? In the
Yeah.
Bible. It's that parable of investing the one talent to generate the return. So I find myself in that sort of place, learning the ropes. ARK has only really been going in this model for about 2 years. We've tried a bit of corporate venture building prior to that, which is constrained, fun but constrained.
Yeah.
So yeah, a couple of years worth of learnings, tons more to learn.
Well, there's always opportunities for that in life, for sure.
Yeah, and we've really
Every
enjoyed
time we say
we've
again.
enjoyed the kind of swapping of learnings with the Eagle Venture Lab and Wade there. We're fans of each other, I think it's fair to say. We learn from each other's approach, mindsets, kind of instincts around spotting an opportunity, building, gathering evidence, and so on. So it's been good fun, good source of learning for us.
Yeah, well, and it's been amazing to see it go from just the one original to now, partnering, collaborating with you guys there in the UK, opening the Singapore, like Eagle Venture Lab Asia office. And then they just opened one in Dallas, collaborating with a local Dallas group called 1845 Ventures here. And it's just fun to see. I mean, those that have been Eagle in the lab space or in the venture studio model know the power of building a team that just has significant trust and having them just rep over and over and over so easily on things. Like I walk in there sometimes and have conversations with the team members, and the things that are just mind-boggling to me, it comes so easy. So you just get in your lane and do the things that you do really, really well, and with the people that you really, really like. And then it's all about just testing new ideas. And once you lock onto something, getting it out there and going with it. So we always say a talented team on a redemptive mission, fighting in a battle that matters. And I love all three of those things, especially in the venture studio model. If you've got the right team of people that you can trust and that they do their job well, it's so easy to collaborate with them. You're not always having to help somebody get their job done because they're committed, they're working.
Yeah,
If it's a redemptive mission, it's so fun. Like you're trying to change something in the world or impact the lives of people. And then, fighting in a battle that truly matters.
yeah,
Something that's going to solve big problems in the world. I know, when people go into those, like you talked about inherently in particular, when people go into those moments, they're already grieving, they're already suffering, and the last thing that they need is for all the planning to have not been done well and right and good. And so it's amazing just the power of peace in a person's life in
mhm,
those terrible, difficult moments.
yeah.
Talk
It's
to me
good.
about that with insurance. I know some people look at the insurance industry and they're like, oh man, it's this thing I have to pay for just to kind of cover my butt in case something bad happens, right? But from a guy who's been in the insurance industry, their most of their career, tell me about the peace of mind and just kind of the goal of the people in the insurance industry.
Yeah. So insurance can get a bad rap. And I think completely unfairly, generally unfairly. Yeah, it sometimes doesn't cover itself with glory, but it exists for a good purpose. The birth of insurance was about protecting people who had been left destitute and making sure it didn't happen again. It was about
Mm,
helping entrepreneurs to take risk in a way that felt manageable.
yeah,
There's a story behind Lloyd's of London. And it still does to this day. I, as an entrepreneur, I take more risk than I would if I weren't covered by professional indemnity and employer liability and these other kind of covers, D&O. Um, and so it allows for risk taking, which is a good thing. It
yeah,
allows for property to be held and owned and for people not to be left destitute when untoward things happen. I'll tell you one story which for me encapsulates the spirit of insurance, which was um, I was at a major European insurance group, HQ in Switzerland, and at the time there were a series of, but it was just before COVID, there were bushfires raging in Australia,
mm,
and it was all over the world news. And there was a poster in the elevator as I was riding with this guy. He was an exec there, and the poster said, oh, donate to the Australian bushfire like recovery efforts or whatever it was. And the world was sort of leaning into, let's help these people out. And I just made small talk in the elevator. I said to the guy, hey, do you guys have much exposure, risk exposure, to the wildfires in Australia? Because this was a large global player, they would have likely had exposure.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't think we do, but I wish we did. And I said, well, that's an odd thing to say. Right? Why would you want to be exposed to those fires? And he said, well, if we were, then we'd be in a position to help the people that were affected.
Interesting.
Right? That's the
Yeah.
spirit of insurance.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, the
When it's done
desire to
right,
help.
it's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no kidding. That's awesome. Talk to me. So you've been an entrepreneur, you've been an entrepreneur, you've got, the venture studio. You've also worked for the big corporations. You've been a consultant. Talk to me about 3 or 4 of the lessons that you've learned in business that have just been really impactful for you over the years. And they could have been learned from a mistake or, learned from a success. But talk to me about those like 3 or 4 things. Then you're like, when we build something in ARK, we're going to do it this way because of the learnings over the years.
Mm. I think gracious. Okay, in no particular order. Um, the power of having a large vision, even one that feels impossible to achieve,
Okay.
um, has has been something that I've often wrestled with. I've sometimes wished I didn't have to carry, but which has always served us well, has attracted people, has kept the wrong people away as well.
Mm,
So the power of a large, meaningful, high-purpose vision
nice.
is, yeah, life's too short to like go for something small. You might as well go for something really big and outrageous and impossible. Um, so the power of the moonshot kind of vision, I think, is one. The power of loyalty and team is another.
Mm,
We've all had team members who've come, who've gone. You've had the people who were in it for themselves. You've had the people who would give their right arm for you. And the latter, those people, the quality of those people, the strength that they give you as an entrepreneur.
yeah.
And my team are 100% those people right now.
And the joy of building together with them.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
it's just it's fun being together, working together. And then finally, the power of or the criticality of cash flow and the fact that generating free cash flows gives you optionality. And one of the things that Eagle actually helped me to arrive at was a funding model for ARK, which was self-sustaining, using
Hmm.
the free cash flows out of my consulting business to fund effectively a perpetual, like a limitless runway for a venture studio, which is otherwise always running out of money.
Yeah.
And that the power of free cash flow gives me options and allows me to be the investor rather than me always to be the person hunting for cash.
That's awesome. Yeah. The taking away the fear of scarcity and giving that feeling of abundance is so powerful. You have the energy, the gumption to continue to go for it when it's not having to worry. I love being around entrepreneurs because when they see a problem in the world, they say, "Well, let's figure it out. Let's go fix it." But they still often run into that problem of, "Uh-oh, we've only got 3 months left to fume. We got to pause everything and go get this like solved." But if you can take that out and build scalable, financial solutions for your work, it allows you to keep going and not to worry as much when you take those risks.
Indeed,
You're
yeah.
taking enough risk already in what you're building. If you can take away a little bit because of these things, that's awesome. Well, talk to me a little bit about the future. 5, 10 years from now, one, tell me a little bit about the insurance industry as you see it, like some of the things that you think will be coming in the next 5 to 10 years on the insurance side, and then maybe also the venture studio side. Do you think more of these venture studios are going to be popping up, and maybe more corporates will be sponsoring them because of the power of their ability to take risk, meaningful risk?
Yeah. 5, 10 years. The insurance industry won't change that much. Fundamentally. I've been in it 20 years, and there's a wonderful narrative which uh, where the end is nigh and we're all going to be disintermediated and technology is going to take over. And sure, of course it's going to, but it does so more slowly than we think. AI is going to be rolled out in more use cases than it has been hitherto. Um, but the thing I really want to see the insurance sector do is lean into what it calls the protection gap, which is all this other stuff. So they protect this stuff they haven't dealt with yet. It's emerging risks, it's systemic risks, it's some of the risks emerging from, let's say, technology. It's the risks that are created by AI.
Hmm.
These things need solving, and it needs a responsible, scaled global industry to solve them. So that's part of what I want to see and I want to be part of building. Venture studios, yeah. I mean, I think the mood music is that the studio model is credible, and I'm hearing more and more people. There's talk. I don't know whether I believe it, but there's talk that it is the future of venture capital.
Hmm.
We'll see. I'd love that to be the case, clearly, but I've got a vested interest there. Um,
Absolutely.
and then from our standpoint, I'd love to see in 5-10 years, I'd be wanting to see some of our early ventures starting to exit. I'd want to see a real flow of ventures. We want to get up to 4 ventures a year.
Okay.
Um, we're not at that stage yet. And I'd want to see some of those ventures becoming real big wins.
Awesome. Can you talk for a minute about insurance as it relates to the human trafficking? I know that's something that you and
Yeah.
some of the Eagle team members have chatted about a little bit. It would be great to just have some thoughts about that, like what that could look like. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, so we've been toying with the idea with the Eagle Freedom Fund and with the Eagle the Venture Lab, um, and it comes down to who 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 has the risk and who experiences the loss. So you've obviously got the trafficked individual, but they've got very little economic sway,
yep.
potentially little economic understanding or ability to connect to products. Um, and so it's more about the other parties that may have economic loss or risk. So we're looking at companies and the obligations that directors have for preventing trafficking, forced labor, modern slavery in their supply chains or in
Mm.
their within the cannabis state. So hotels and resorts is one. That's something we've been talking with Wade and the team at the Venture Lab about. Um, hotels are where quite a lot of sex trafficking and sex work takes place. The owners of those hotel chains have a level of liability exposure to that.
Yeah, there was
Um,
another one that got uh, a lawsuit and had to pay out 40 million in
yeah.
the state of Georgia just within the last month or so.
So, what are insurers doing about the directors and officers liability product, and does it or does it not include and factor in some of these things? We're starting to see in some parts of the world, the UK being, I think, the leading proponent of very strong laws. There's one in the UK called the Modern Slavery Act, which is one of only about 2 laws that can send me as a director to prison.
Mm.
And that is, yeah, if there's slavery in my supply chain of any of my business interests, doesn't matter how deep it goes, it can go all the way back up to me, and it's treated as strongly as bribery. And so in those kind of countries, I think Canada, I think Australia, the US may be looking at it, the European Union is probably looking at it. That forces companies and directors to take uh, trafficking, slavery, forced labor very, very seriously. And
Mm.
in certain industries like shipping, construction, think construction in the Middle East, um, agriculture, fishing, there are significant amounts of dubious kind of labor practices, and it's in that space that we've been looking at business models where insurance models could be deployed. What we don't want to do is just build an insurance product, wait for something bad to happen, someone to be trafficked, and then have a direct to protect it. What we
Right.
want to do, and what the insurer wants, this is an alignment of interest. The insurer wants to stop that trafficking from happening
In the first place.
in the first place. So
Right.
alongside a risk transfer product, the ideas we've been kicking around are risk mitigation, risk prevention tools and techniques. And some of the portfolio companies in the Eagle Freedom Fund have got some of these capabilities. if we were to connect them to an insurance product, they would act to deter and dissuade and detect trafficking from happening in the first place. And then as a second layer of protection, they would protect the director of the company. The director of the company would buy the product for that protection of themselves, but the insurer would deploy all of these dissuasion techniques in
Nice.
order to defend against a claim in the first place. Right? So there's a nice kind of triangle of aligned interests that plays if you can get that right.
Yeah, it seems like that's been a lot of the conversation we've had with these businesses. They're trying to solve a big problem, that it's often a nonprofit solves it because the person who you're helping can't pay for the solution because
Yeah.
they're in the problem. The
Yeah.
problem has been happening to them, as opposed to being on the other side of it where there's a company. If you can find that company that's got a pain point, and if you can solve it for the company, then it ends up helping that
Yeah.
person to get there. That's really cool.
It's making it an economic interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. It's amazing that, we're in conversations around those types of things, but we get to have get to meet and get to work alongside, somebody that's building insurance products for the last, 20 plus years, to think through it and process with it. I just think it's amazing sometimes how in the Lord brings just the right people together to have these conversations and to think through who's the best in the world at coming up with this stuff and who would be a great partner for it. Oh, let's, have the chance to meet and
It's
work
fun, isn't
alongside
it?
them.
It's
Yeah.
fun.
It's
Yeah.
incredible. Awesome. Well, I hate to finish a conversation, without thinking, hey, we gave people a little bit to think about. We gave people a little bit to feel, right? Like, but what's an action step after a person listens to a podcast about insurance? What might you say to like people who are listening out there, and just as a next step for them to either learn more or to take action?
I'd encourage them to think about the risks, the fears, the possible losses that they experience in their life,
Mm.
um, and and toy with the idea of, okay, what would it look like if we were to attack that risk?
Hmm.
Not just, I'm not, auto insurance is done, home insurance is done, business insurance is done. New stuff. What are the new things that we could go and solve? And get in touch with us and give us, talk to us about your ideas. I'd also love to talk to any second, third time CEOs out there who are, who've exited and are looking for the next business they want to go build, because we've got businesses coming off the production line that need
Ah,
high quality CEO to come and help us lead. Yeah, so those would be some action points.
awesome. Is it arkventurestudio.com?
It's arkventure.studio.
Arkventure.studio. Okay. Awesome. Well, we'll have that in the show notes. Very cool. Well, man, thanks for taking the time to talk today, Dan. I really enjoyed learning a little bit more about what you guys are doing, about the model, about the mission. It's so exciting to hear about the things that are happening over there in the UK.
Well, thank you
Hopefully,
for having me on. Big thank you to you and the rest of the Eagle crew for your partnership, your support. We appreciate it.